All right, so in this question, this whole word problem, basically, if you read it, it is just creating that image for you, and it is asking you for some information here. So it's asking you for two things. One of the things it is asking you for is the what this angle should be here with the ground. The next thing that it is asking you for is this horizontal distance here. So because this is our trig unit, we are not going to use the Pythagorean theorem here. We are going to use actual trig. So at this point, we are going to look at a situation where we're not going to use the Pythagorean theorem. Again, we have to use trig. So if I want to use trig to find one of my angles here, I'm going to have to know one of my side lengths. I have to know one of my angles. Well, in this case, I don't actually know one of my angles, so I have to start this one by finding an angle. So remember, anytime that we are finding an angle, we use one of our arc functions. So it could be arc sine, arc cosine, arc tangent. So in this case, if I'm looking at this angle here, I'm given the opposite, and I'm also given the hypotenuse. So I need to change 11 feet and 3 inches into decimals. So we know that there are 12 inches in a foot. So 3 over 12 is a quarter. So this is actually 11.25. Okay, so at this point, we now have enough information to find the value of this angle because we have two side lengths. So I'm given the opposite and the hypotenuse. So if I'm thinking about SOHCAHTOA here, if I have the opposite and the hypotenuse, I need to use sine. Since I'm trying to find an angle, I need to use arc sine. So I'm going to say the arc sine of the opposite, which is 11.25, over the hypotenuse, which is 13. We're going to round this to the nearest thousandth. So I'm going to take the arc sine of 11.25 divided by 13, and I get that the value of that angle is about 59.927. So this angle right here, the angle that the wires need to make with the ground, is 59.927, which is about 60 degrees, of course, but for the sake of using trig, we're going to keep it a little bit more specific at 59.927. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to find this angle measure. So we actually have two options here for what trig function we're going to use because we know the value of this angle. And we know both the opposite and we're looking for the adjacent, and we know the hypotenuse and we're looking for the adjacent. So we can either use cosine or tangent. And this one, I'm going to use tangent just because that's what I've chosen to do. So I know the tangent of whatever my angle measure is, which in this case is 59.927. So the tangent of that angle is going to be equal to the side length that is opposite it, which is 11.25, over the side length that it is adjacent to, which is x. So at this point, I'm going to cross multiply here. So that's going to give me x multiplied by the tangent of 59.927 is equal to 11.25. So to solve for x here, I need to divide by the tangent of 59.927. So that is going to give me an x value of 6.514 feet. So about 6.5 feet there. So 6.514 feet. So thinking about this, this is one of those times where if you aren't really, if you get overwhelmed and you start thinking about the picture and you're like, that looks longer, you really need to think about the math there, because we know that this is 90. We know that if this is 60, that this has to be 30. So the side length opposite the 30-degree angle is going to be shorter than the side length opposite the 60-degree angle. It just doesn't look proportional. But again, you have to trust the math that you've done. So again, your answers there are right there. So for the next one, I'm just going to go through the answers. I'm not going to solve out each problem, but then what I want you to do is if there's one you need me to go over, then I want you to actually go back and email me about that so I can make a video to go over it. All right, so moving on to page 220. So for number one, in order to solve, I used the sine function. So I said the sine of 72.5 was equal to x over 14. Again, I hope you drew images for this, but I got that x was equal to 13.352. In the second question, I used tangent. So I ended up setting up that the tangent of 50 was equal to 18 over x, and I got that x was equal to 15 and 104 thousandths. For number 3, I used arctan, so I set the arctan was equal to 0.34 over 0.15, and I got that x was about 66.19 degrees. Then for number 4, I was trying to find an angle, so for this one I used the arc sine, and that ended up being 260 over 650. So I got an x value of about 23.58. Then for number 5, I have to solve the entire right triangle. So for the value of angle A, I got 32 degrees. For the value of side length AC, I got 27.138. I believe that I cheated and I used triangle sum, so don't be surprised if you have like a rounded situation there. And then for BC, we have 16.957 as the value there. So those are the 3 missing pieces of that triangle. For number 6, we end up using the tangent here. So I set up the tangent of 47 was equal to x over 52. I got an x value of 55 and 763 thousandths. But then that's just a value here, and it wants to know how high above the floor the thing goes, and it's an additional 5 feet. So the answer here is actually 60 and 763 thousandths. Then we move on to number 7, and we know that if the entire thing here is 50, that this piece here is 25. So I ended up saying that the sine of 30 was equal to 14.43 over x, and that's B. And in that case, I got that the actual beam was equal to 28.86 feet. But then it tells me that I need to add 2 feet to the beam length, so it can extend 2 feet past the walls. So if I add 2 there, it means that each one of the beams has to be 30.86 feet. Then it also asks you to find just the cosine of 30 degrees. So the cosine of 30 degrees there was equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So that's 25 over 28.86, because again, the hypotenuse is just 28.86. The beam is 30.86. And that gives us a value, if you find the decimal equivalent, of about 0.866. All right, y'all, we are almost done here. So for the next question here, they are just asking you to find this value here. It tells you that that is 35.355 there. And it is asking you to find basically the sine of this 45 here. So I'm going to do the sine of 45, and I'm trying to find the height here. So that's going to be x over our 50, because that's my opposite over my hypotenuse. So I know that that vertical there is going to give me an x of about 35.355. So that piece there, and that makes sense because if this is a right angle, or if this is a right triangle and one of them's 45, the other one's 45, so they should be equal there. Then the sine of 45 degrees is equal to the opposite, which is 35.55 over the hypotenuse, which is 50. So that's what the sine of 45 degrees is. And if you find the decimal equivalent, it's about 0.707. So those are your solutions there. Then we move on to number 9 here, and it is telling us here that we want to start by finding the, how do we start this one? Sorry, y'all. All right, so we know that these are going to be proportional triangles here. So I'm going to, all right, so because these are similar triangles, this angle is going to be the same. So I want to start down here by finding the angle that the shadow forms with the person. So in order to do that, that is going to be this angle right here. So that's opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to do the arctan of my opposite, which is 5.75, over my adjacent, which is 11.5. And I get that the value of that angle there is going to be 26.57 degrees. So I know here that now I can go up and apply this 26.57 degrees there. So now if I want to figure out how tall the tree is there, I know that the tree is going to be, well, I know this angle, and then I want to find the opposite, and I'm given the adjacent. So I know that the tangent of 26.57 would be equal to the opposite, which is x, over the adjacent, which is 45. So I'm going to cross multiply here, and I get that x is equal to 45 times the tangent of 26.57. So that's 45 times the tangent of 26.57, and that is going to give us that it is about 22.5 feet tall here. The last thing it asks for is the tangent of A. So in this case, the tangent of A is the opposite over the adjacent. So that's 22.5 over 45. Well, 22.5 over 45 is 0.5. And if you had done the opposite over adjacent here, it would have been 5 and 75 hundredths over 11 and 0.5, and that would still be the tangent of A, and you would get 0.5 as well. All right, last question here is just asking you to find B and C. So in order to find B, I did that the tangent of 20 degrees was equal to 5 over B, and I got that B was equal to 13.737 feet. And then for the next piece, oh, I didn't, so that, and that told me that was 14.62. Then the last thing I had to do was find the sine of B. So the sine of B then is going to be the opposite, which I already figured out, which is 13.737 over the hypotenuse, which is 14.62. So the sine of B ends up being about 0.94. All right, so I hope that is helpful there. Again, your only work today is to go into Delta Math. All right, so in Delta Math, I don't really know why you can't see it, because it's right outside the view of what I have, but the assignment's called Walch 5.4, Calculating Side Lengths and Angles. Right here, it says using trig to find sides, and then it says using trig to find angles. So both of those little pieces are part of this. It's 20 questions total, but again, there's no new lesson for today. It was just checking your work. So that is sort of it when it comes to trig here. We're going to look at one more lesson tomorrow, and then we'll actually finish this unit on Thursday and Friday. All right, bye.